When we finally had the means to move up in the world, my wife, Janine, and I, Neville, set our sights on a quiet little cul-de-sac called Blueberry Way. It was a charming neighborhood, consisting of 10 houses arranged in a neat, orderly manner. The odd-numbered homes lined the left side, the even-numbered ones on the right. Our home, number 9, stood at the very end, its backyard sloping gently toward the river. It wasn't ideal for families with small children, but since we had none, that suited us just fine. Across from us, number 10 was also for sale, but it was smaller and had a less appealing garden. Besides, I had always considered 9 to be my lucky number, and I wasn't about to question fate. The house needed a bit of work, but nothing we couldn't handle. The most expensive renovation, the electrical wiring, had already been taken care of. I had recently landed 2 lucrative contracts, and with my commissions safely in the bank, we could afford the necessary updates. Since I mostly worked from home, I had plenty of time to take on the DIY projects. The cold season set in as we gradually transformed our home, opting for underfloor heating to keep things cozy. I was comfortable handling most of the tasks except for plumbing, while Janine proved to be quite the artist. One of her murals on our living room wall was so breathtaking that we often joked it was more entertaining than the television. One crisp December morning, frost coated the ground. Janine was running late for work, so I grabbed her car keys and a kettle of warm water, not too hot, to defrost her windshield. I started the engine, cranked the heater to full blast, and wiped the glass clean with a squeegee. As I glanced at the odometer, something caught my eye. It read 9,008 miles, a number divisible by 9. It was a small detail, insignificant to most, but not to me. I had an odd fascination with numbers. If my calculations were correct by the time she returned that evening, it should read 9,036 miles. Just a silly little thing I kept track of for fun. "Thanks for warming my car, sweetheart," Janine said, kissing me on the cheek. "What's your project for today?" "Last one on the list, the cupboard under the stairs. I've been putting it off, but I suppose I'll just paint the inside white," I replied. "Good luck with that. Oh, and if you have time, see if you can pick up a Christmas tree? We'll decorate it this weekend," she called out before heading to work. I poured myself another cup of coffee and opened the door to the understairs cupboard. It was plain, sloping downward as expected, with paneling covering the underside of the steps. The lowest section was blocked off, likely for structural reasons, leaving little space for storage. We had already unpacked everything, and I couldn't think of a practical use for it. As I stepped inside, a few odd details stood out. A rusted hook hung just inside the door. Nearby, a round metal stud about the size of a large coin was embedded into the sloping paneling. The floor was another mystery, smooth pine boards in stark contrast to the granite tiles in the hallway. A faded welcome mat lay awkwardly in the middle, its presence completely unnecessary in such a space. Curious, I reached for the hook, accidentally knocking over my coffee in the process. The mug hit the floor with a dull thud, but oddly, I didn't hear the metal hook land. When I looked down, the coffee had vanished, absorbed into the floorboards. I lifted the mat, and suddenly, everything made sense. A small, nearly invisible hole sat beneath the mat. Beside it, another metal stud, identical to the one on the wall. I tested my theory, hooking the metal piece into the hole and pulling upward. With a soft click, the entire floor lifted. Beneath it, a narrow staircase of cold, gray concrete descended into darkness. My heart pounded. I ran to grab a flashlight, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this a forgotten basement? Had the previous owners even known it existed? I descended the steps cautiously. At the bottom, a warped wooden door stood closed, locked with an old iron key that hung conveniently on a nearby nail. With a deep breath, I turned the key and pushed the door open. Inside, the air was stale, the space empty. No signs of pests, no water damage, just a cold, dry room, spanning nearly a third of the house's footprint. I ran my hand along the walls, finding them solid and well constructed. That evening, I shared my discovery with Janine. "A hidden basement? That's amazing!" she exclaimed, eyes shining with excitement. "Do you realize what this means? Our house is the only one in the cul-de-sac with one. This could increase our property value." She was right. The original blueprints showed that every house was supposed to have a basement, but notes in the city records indicated that the plan had been abandoned due to costs. Ours, the first home built, had been the only exception. We discussed potential uses for the space: storage, a home gym, a cozy entertainment room. Before deciding, I called a contractor to assess its condition. His verdict: dry, structurally sound, but cold. With proper heating and lighting, it could be a fantastic addition to our home. A few days later, the work began. On Tuesday morning, I had to leave for a business trip. "I'll be in Liverpool," I told Janine over breakfast. "Meeting scheduled for Wednesday morning. I'll be back that night." "Will you drive to the station?" she asked. "Yeah, and you should park your car in the garage while I'm gone," I suggested. "Good idea," she nodded. The next morning was frosty again, so I performed my usual warm water routine on her car before she left. As she pulled away, I noted the mileage: 9,124 miles. I kissed her goodbye, packed my small overnight bag, and headed off to catch my train. When I returned Wednesday night, Janine greeted me warmly. "How was the meeting?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me. "Better than expected," I said with a smile. "They renewed the contract for 2 more years. Looks like we can afford that summer trip we talked about." Her eyes lit up. "That's amazing, Neville. Seychelles, right?" "Or Prague and the Dalmatian coast," I teased. She laughed. "I'll start looking at flights." It was a freezing Thursday morning when I went outside to warm her car again. That's when I noticed something odd. The odometer read 9,142 miles. It should have been at least 9,160 miles after 2 full days of work. A strange unease settled in my stomach. Had she gone somewhere other than work? Had she even used her car at all? I glanced across the street. Number 10 had put up Christmas lights while I was away. Maybe it was nothing, but something about it felt wrong. And that was the moment, the very first moment, when the suspicion started to creep in. The new basement had already become an unexpected addition to our home, but after discovering Janice's betrayal, it took on a different meaning for me. While she believed it was simply an extension of our living space, I saw it as something more: a quiet, secluded place where I could think, plan, and decide my next steps. Janice remained oblivious to what I had uncovered. She went about her daily routines, smiling, laughing, and playing the role of a devoted wife, all while keeping secrets of her own. But I had secrets too. Over the next few days, I monitored her movements and messages. She hadn't gone to her boss's house again, but their communication suggested they were being more cautious. She mentioned something about a business trip after the holidays, an opportunity for them to spend more time together. It was clear that while she may have slowed down, she wasn't stopping. The realization hit me in waves. I was married to someone who could lie so easily, someone who had carefully planned out her deceit. And yet, I played my part, never letting on that I knew. The basement was now fully furnished, warm and inviting. We had set up a TV, comfortable seating, and even a stocked mini fridge. It was a place meant for relaxation, but in my mind, it became something else entirely, a place of reckoning. The steel door installed under the guise of house stability was more than just a replacement for the old wooden one. It was secure, sturdy, and locked from the outside. If needed, it could serve as a temporary holding space. I wasn't planning anything reckless, not yet, but I needed to know how far Janice was willing to go, and that required patience. It was a Friday evening when I noticed something odd. Janice had been texting on her phone, her fingers moving quickly as she smiled at the screen. "Who are you chatting with?" I asked casually, setting my glass of wine on the table. "Oh, just Lisa," she replied, mentioning one of her coworkers. "She's going through some drama with her boyfriend." "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just the usual relationship stuff." She set her phone face down on the table and sipped her drink, her expression neutral. But I wasn't convinced. A few minutes later, when she excused herself to get something from the kitchen, I quickly flipped her phone over. The screen was still unlocked, and I saw the name at the top of the chat. It wasn't Lisa. It was her boss. The message read, "I can't wait to see you." Same place? A chill ran through me. She was planning to meet him again. I took a deep breath and placed the phone back exactly as it was. When she returned, I acted as if nothing had happened. If she wanted to lie, I would let her, but I wouldn't be the fool she thought I was. That night, while she slept beside me, I checked her phone history once more. The meeting was set for Sunday evening. She had told me she was going to a work dinner with some colleagues, but now I knew the truth. I had a choice to make. I could confront her, expose her lies, and demand answers. But something inside me held back. No, not yet. Instead, I decided to. Instead, I follow her. Sunday evening came, and Janice left the house dressed elegantly, her perfume lingering in the air as she kissed my cheek goodbye. "Don't wait up," she said with a playful wink. "I won't," I replied, forcing a smile. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my coat and keys. I had already placed a small GPS tracker under her car earlier that day, so I knew exactly where she was headed. I drove a safe distance behind her, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. She parked outside a quiet hotel on the outskirts of town. I pulled into a spot across the street and watched as she stepped out, adjusting her dress before walking inside. Moments later, her boss arrived, greeting her with a kiss, right there in public, as if they had nothing to hide. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. It wasn't just a fling. This was something deeper, something ongoing. I could have stormed inside, caused a scene, demanded answers, but I didn't. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures. If she thought she was being careful, she had underestimated me. Janice came home late, just as I expected. She walked in, her hair slightly disheveled, her lipstick faded. She looked at me with a smile that sickened me. "Hey, you're still up?" she asked. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep," I replied, pretending to be engrossed in a TV show. "How was the dinner?" "Oh, just the usual work talk," she said, kicking off her heels. "Exhausting, really." I forced a chuckle. "Well, at least it's over." She nodded, stretching. "I'm going to shower and head to bed." I watched her disappear down the hallway, her lies filling the space between us. But now I had something she didn't expect. I had proof, and soon she would know exactly what that meant. Janice's lies had gone too far. I had given her the benefit of the doubt, played along with her act, but now I had undeniable proof of her betrayal. The pictures on my phone weren't just images, they were confirmation that the person I had trusted the most had been living a double life right in front of me. But the question wasn't if I was going to confront her, it was how. I knew that a simple argument wouldn't be enough. Janice was too good at lying, too good at twisting the truth to fit her narrative. If I wanted her to face reality, I needed to make sure she had no way out. The next morning, Janice acted as if nothing had happened. She moved around the house humming a soft tune, sipping her coffee like a woman without a care in the world. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. "I did," I lied. I had barely slept at all. My mind had been racing with possibilities, playing out different ways to handle the situation. "I was thinking," I continued, keeping my tone casual. "We should spend more time together. Maybe a weekend trip somewhere, just the two of us." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a split second, I saw hesitation. "Oh, that sounds great. But work has been so busy lately, maybe next month?" She was stalling. I nodded, pretending to accept her excuse, but inside, my frustration grew. Instead of pushing the issue, I changed the subject. "By the way, I finally finished setting up the basement. You should come check it out later." She smiled. "I will." But we both knew she wouldn't. That evening, Janice had another work meeting. She kissed me goodbye, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door, completely unaware that I had seen through every single one of her lies. I didn't follow her this time. I didn't need to. I already knew where she was going. Instead, I stayed home and prepared for what came next. A couple of hours later, I received a text from her. "Staying a little longer than expected. Don't wait up." I stared at the screen, my grip tightening around my phone. If she only knew that I was always one step ahead of her now. When Janice finally returned home past midnight, she tried to sneak in quietly, but I was already sitting in the living room waiting. She jumped slightly when she saw me. "Oh, you're still up?" I nodded. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." She forced a smile, running a hand through her hair. "It was such a long night. Work has been crazy." I tilted my head. "Is that so?" There was something about my tone that made her hesitate. She glanced at me cautiously. "Yeah. Why?" I took a deep breath, then reached for my phone. Without saying a word, I pulled up the pictures, the ones of her and her boss outside the hotel. I turned the screen toward her, her face drained of color. Silence filled the room as she stared at the evidence, her mouth opening and closing as if trying to find the right words. But there were none. "When were you going to tell me?" I finally asked, my voice steady but cold. What? What is this?" She stammered, still trying to deny it. "You know exactly what it is, Janice." She swallowed hard, stepping back as if putting distance between us would change the reality in front of her. "It's not what you think." I let out a hollow laugh. "Oh, so you weren't meeting your boss at a hotel? You weren't kissing him? Explain it to me then." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were from guilt or the realization that she had been caught. I didn't mean for this to happen." I shook my head. "That's not an excuse." She covered her face with her hands. "I was lonely. I felt like you weren't paying attention to me anymore, and he made me feel special." I clenched my jaw. "So your solution was to betray me?" "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "But you did." The weight of the truth finally crashed down on her, and she sank onto the couch, wiping her tears. "Please, let's talk about this. We can fix it." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "No, Janice, you broke this? And now I have to decide if it's even worth saving." She looked at me desperately, waiting for my next words. But I wasn't sure I had any left. Janice sat frozen on the couch, her face streaked with tears. For the first time, she wasn't trying to lie her way out of it. There was no excuse she could give, no words that could erase what she had done. I had spent years building a life with this woman, trusting her, believing in our marriage. And now I was faced with a painful truth. It had all been a lie. She sniffled, wiping her face. "Please, we can work through this. I don't want to lose you." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "Janice, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice, repeatedly." She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. The weight of her actions finally seemed to sink in. "I love you," she whispered. I shook my head. "Number. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." Silence settled between us like a heavy fog. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt clarity. There was no more questioning, no more doubts. I knew what I had to do. "I can't do this anymore," I finally said. Janice's breath hitched. "You don't mean that." "I do." My voice was steady. "This isn't just about the affair, it's about trust, about respect. And you destroyed both." She buried her face in her hands. "I was weak. I made a terrible mistake. But I never stopped loving you." I stood up, looking down at her. "Love isn't just words, Janice. It's actions. And your actions showed me exactly where I stand in your life." Her shoulders shook as she sobbed, but I didn't feel anger anymore, just sadness. "I'll start looking for a place to stay," I said, my voice firm. She lifted her head, her eyes wide with panic. "No, please don't leave. We can fix this. I'll do anything." I exhaled sharply. "You already had a choice, Janice, and you made it." Packing my bags wasn't easy. Every item I put away carried a memory. Our wedding photos, the souvenirs from trips we had taken, the little notes she used to leave for me. But those memories weren't enough to stay. Janice hovered in the doorway, watching me. "Do you really have to go?" I zipped my suitcase. "Yeah, I do." She wiped her tears. "What happens now?" I sighed. "We move on. Separately." Her lip trembled, but she nodded. "I'll regret this for the rest of my life." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As I walked toward the door, I took one last look at the home we had built together. It was hard to leave, but I knew in my heart that I deserved better. Without another word, I stepped out and closed the door behind me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.